So memory. Who's going to read today?
I can start.
Good.
The term memory has its derivative from the Latin memoria, and its lineage is from the Greek memoros and merimna. Memoros means care for and has a sense of being anxious. Merimna means thought or solitude. Finally, the Old English word merman, which means sadness or anxiety, carries out the meaning of the Latin mora, delay. Latin mora, delay, a meaning evident in memories, moratori, and mourn, as well as in the suggestive power of remember. Memory has no separate organ in the brain, so it is not a form of storage space. Rather, it is a neural achievement of nerve cells working associatively within a network of chains generating neurochemical reactions. Memory creates pathways through the nervous system based on repeated patterns and then through a process of association. Mnemosyne is the Greek goddess of memory. She was the daughter of Uranus, heaven, and Gaia, earth, and she was the mother of 9 children with Zeus, who were known as the 9 Muses. She represented both individual and collective memory, and that memory served as the basis of both rational thought and artistic inspiration. The Imago Mundi is a Babylonian map that dates from the 6th century BC.
This is one of the earliest known maps. That's interesting in relationship to memory, the whole process of mapping. So giving a spatial dimension to memory.
Memory for Aristotle involves being aware of the time that has passed since the original. This implies that memory is not a recreation of the original experience, but a process with its own casual context that requires imagination. Memory, therefore, is viewed as an affection which is different from reminiscence.
That's Pompeii, isn't it?
Yes. The volcanic eruption that served to bury Pompeii in ash was as if the gods had transformed this place into a vast time-lapse photograph and thereby turning it into an image of eternity, and in the process of this, linking preservation and destruction into a single passage.
Frescoes in Pompeii, in one of the villas in Pompeii, on the edge of Pompeii.
Fayum portraits record a living resemblance of beings who passed through to the realm of the dead. The journey of the soul was the principal object of Egyptian culture. These portraits serve as a meeting point of memory and imagination, in which the memory of the living appearance fuses with the gaze of the departed soul in the journey into the afterlife. And this is a Fayum portrait in Egypt, 1st century BC to 3rd century AD.
So it combined Greco-Roman portraiture with Egyptian process of the dead.
It looks very contemporary somehow.
Yeah, I once showed these fine portraits as a slideshow about a contemporary. I said it's a contemporary painter, and everyone went with it. Everyone thought I was not, simulating something. So when I told them it was 2,000 years old or more, they were shocked.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I think there's a lot there's quite a number in the Louvre, and Giacometti was so very connected with looking at Egyptian art. So he'd have known these. There's a kind of haunting quality, which is a bit like Giacometti.
But also, I mean, Egyptian art is sort of known for its flatness and profiles, so it gets away from that completely.
Mm.
Would you say that elongated shape is also linked, Nesidimasmi of Modigliani as well?
Yeah, I think they all went to Louvre and discussed things together.
Archives, collections, libraries, museums all constituted various types of memory systems. This is the Celsus Library, 110 CE,
Yeah.
which held 12,000 scrolls.
I mean, there were methods, some of these libraries in Alexander and Babylonian libraries and Greek and Roman. They contained a lot of all the known written documents of the world were contained within some of these libraries, and they also served as an attractor to scholars from the rest of the world. So they're a melting pot of languages. A lot of people spoke multiple languages, so it's a kind of like a miniature university.
Where was this library?
What's that?
Where is the Celsus Library?
It's in just on the edge of Turkey, southern Turkey.
Wow.
It's really beautiful. The whole site is wonderful.
The temple complex of Angkor Wat was the largest known in that period, but was abandoned and was in turn overgrown by the surrounding forest. It was as if the life that had been lived within the complex had been forgotten, so it was referred to as the lost ruins of Angkor. Wow.
So it's literally overgrown by the forest and disappeared. It was the largest, it still is the largest religious complex in the world, but it was abandoned and left to be overgrown as if it didn't exist. It just disappeared into the forest. And it was discovered again really in the 19th century with there was a sort of cult of visiting it, the French, it was French colony, and they in fact reproduced Angkor Wat in a trade in a kind of big uh, Parisian display of colonial artifacts.
I think this is actually one of the smaller temples. There's a number of temples around the main Angkor Wat, because Angkor Wat is actually the biggest temple, but there's lots of smaller ones. I think that's where they filmed Tomb Raider, actually, with that big route. But I think they were also, it was quite instrumental, I think, after the Vietnam War, wasn't it, of them finding with aerial mapping lots of sites that were still hidden under the jungle. So they went in and I think there's still more to discover.
Mm. I mean, it's just literally vast, complex,
Mm.
and the sense of what culture it was disappeared. So there's not really written documentation, or people didn't continue to live there. There's a few monks.
It's the most extraordinary thing to visit, though, if anyone ever has the chance. And the jungles, the old jungle that contains it, is just such an incredible space. So it's really beautiful to be in the jungle, let alone walking around the temples.
How long ago did you go? How long ago was it since you went?
Probably about 5 years ago now.
Mm.
Stunning.
How long did it take you to explore the site?
I'd say you need at least 3 days, and we would just go in and out. But what's really beautiful is to go for sunrise or sunset. So get up very early in the morning and take a tuk-tuk in, and then be there before the crowds descend. And a lot of people go for the sunrise at Angkor Wat anyway to sort of get the perfect photo. But some of the other smaller temples are more beautiful to just have that sort of peaceful morning and moment before, sort of busloads of Japanese or Chinese tourists descend in. And there's just still a lot of ruins around, so you're sort of wandering around, tripping over incredible carvings and sculptures and a lot of it was sort of beheaded and taken back to the museums in Europe, but there's still a lot that remains.
Mm. There's a lot in Paris.
Mm. You sort of go across these incredible bridges, and there's sort of, unfortunately, they're sort of lopped off. That one exists. That one's lopped off. So there's sort of a lot of damage has been done, but you still get an incredible sense of the site.
Shall I go on?
Yeah, go on.
Sati is the Pali word which means memory or retention, and is often translated as mindfulness. Being able to recall the past lives plays an important role within the construction of this concept. Show me your original face before you were born. Zen Koan. Haikuin Ekaka Daruma. Bodhidharma. Whatever that means. 1750s.
There's Daruma. He's the founder really of Zen Buddhism or Chan Buddhism. He traveled from India to China.
Ekaka, you mean? Hakuin. Is that? Yeah.
No, that's the artist, 18th century priest and painter.
So it's Zen Koan.
Yeah, Zen.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Each instant covers the entire world. Dogen. Far Eastern culture is based on a different philosophy of time to that of Greco-Roman society, which was regulated by a rationalist, progressive orientation with an open sense of the future. Eastern mapping of time is defined by circular figurations based on ideas related to karma, yugas, and eternal return. Aboriginal culture is defined by its relationship to the land, which revolves around animist belief systems. Songlines are dreaming tracks, which are followed as pathways across the earth and sky. Modernity was formed around a distinct form of understanding the idea of progressive time. Within Enlightenment philosophy, Kant understood memory as the storing and reproducing of representations based upon the experience and in turn form a link to human cognition. Alternatively, Leibniz viewed memory as constitutive of consciousness. In Freud, the unconscious is in possession of a temporality called Zeitlos or timeless. The time of death is not dead time or a time of nothing, but has its own time, a mode of time in which death is a scandalous or detained temporality. It is because the immanence of dead time in bound living time that psychoanalytical temporality is provided with an archaic. Against the flow of time, memory, according to Freud, is a lasting trace, spur, of excitation, and as such, memory is unconscious. It is also the crossroads of energy and representation, heterogeneity. The memory trace, whose repetition is unaware of time, can sometimes seep into very concealed, elaborate, and sublimatory formations that marks them with the unsettling strangeness of the atemporal.
Does everyone understand that? Or is there anything to discuss with it?
Well, I think this whole point about the unconscious being timeless is important. The unconscious is outside of time.
Mm.
I was also thinking, so Western thinking is in a way linear, see time and space and sort of moving forward, sort of directioning, while ancient Asian is more of the loop around, it goes around and comes around. And while in here that temporalness or spaceness, sort of that concept is sort of disappearing. So we don't know where this memory is. Is it linear or in the loop, or a temporal sort of disappearing?
The discovery of the unconscious formally, and I mean, it started with the Jena Romantics, Hegel and Schelling. Schelling was the first to use the term unconscious in relationship to nature. But it's also the time of the, in science, in physics, those changes. So, in a way, it's sort of complicated time.
Matter and Memory, Henri Bergson. The pure present is an ungraspable advance of the past devouring the future. In truth, all sensation is already memory. We seize in the act of perception something which outruns perception itself. Materiality begets oblivion. A Tomb for Anatoly by Stefan Mallarmé. In 1879, the poet Stefan Mallarmé's 8-year-old son died, and he tried to compose a poem in a symbolic tomb. He wrote over 200 fragments, but he could not complete any poem, so they remained unpublished.
This is fabulous. There's 205 fragments, which he couldn't finalize one. They're all terse and truncated and eruptive, even. It wasn't published in his lifetime, but it's seen as one of the great documents of French symbolist poetry. I mean, literally imagined he could write a poem which would serve as an epitaph or gravestone for his son. And he failed. But I mean, it's the fact that it remained an unpublished fragment which was so powerful.
I distinguish two kinds of Rilkean memory, embodied and affective. An embodied Rilkean memory is a bodily or behavioral disposition. An affective Rilkean memory is a mood or feeling. In both forms, Rilkean memories are individuated by the episodic memory out of which they have evolved, and in both forms, they result from the loss of content of this memory. And yet it is not enough to have memories. You must be able to forget them when they are many, and you must have the immense patience to wait until they return. For the memories themselves are not important. Only when they have changed into our very blood, into glance and gesture, and are nameless, no longer to be distinguished from ourselves, only then can it happen that in some very rare hour, the first word of a poem arises in their midst and goes forth from them.
It's Rilke.
Rilke said, desires are memories from our future.
It was like a koan.
That's almost circular. I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, Bruce breaks open the relation of memory, desire, and the future in a
Yeah.
Proust.
All memories are like the bog that fills the hollows of the cemetery or the cold, muddy waters of ruins. The totality of the memories of the world can ignore destruction, but we have only a fragmentary grasp of the memories of the world. All that remains are moments and incidents. Proust, Remembrance of Things Past. In Search of Lost Time, Volume 1, The Way by Swans. The moments of the past do not remain still. They retain in our memory the motion which drew them towards the future. towards a future which has itself become the past and draw us on in their train. And suddenly the memory revealed itself. In Search of Lost Time was published in 7 volumes between 1913 and 1927. The novel is concerned with vast changes in French class structure and at the turn of the century. We are able to find everything in our memory, which is like a dispensary of chemical laboratory in which chance steers our hand sometimes to a soothing drug and sometimes to a dangerous poison. Deleuze is reading a Proust novel, In Search of Lost Time, à la recherche du temps perdu, in Proust and Signs, 1964, contains a striking claim that what constitutes its unity is not memory, including involuntary memory. The search is not steered by the effort of recall or the exploration of memory, but by the desire for truth, which, following Nietzsche, we can say is always hard. Memory intervenes in this search only as a means, but not the most profound means, just as past time intervenes as a structure of time, but not the most profound one. Moreover, the search, according to Deleuze, is oriented not to the past, but to the future. The stress on the need to overcome memory and an advocacy of the superiority of the future are prevalent throughout the span of Deleuze's oeuvre. Memories are killing, so you must not think of certain things, of those that are dear to you, or rather you must think of them, for if you don't, there is a danger of finding them in your mind little by little. Nothing is more real than nothing. Samuel Beckett's play Krapp's Last Tape, 1958, is a short play about an old man remembering his past life, in which he listens to his recordings of his passage through life.
It's quite a remarkable device he used.
The poet Paul Celan, 1920 to 1970, was a Romanian-born Holocaust survivor who became an important figure in post-war war. I suppose that's post-World War II. I suppose so, post-World War II German literature, I suppose that's what that means. He suffered intense guilt over the deaths of his parents in the camps. Celan was to be found drowned in the river Seine 50 years after his birth. His poetry is soaked with the weight of memory and by what remained beyond representation. Only one thing remained reachable, close and secure amid all losses: language. Yes, language. In spite of everything, it remained secure against loss, but it had got to go through its own lack of answers, through terrifying silence, through the thousand darknesses of murderous speech. It went through. It gave me no words for what was happening, but went through and could resurface, enriched by it all. Marguerite Duras, the words emerged from her body without her realizing it, as if she were being visited by the memory of a language long forsaken.
A lot of books involve issues of forgetting and
It is not only the arduousness of the effort of memory that confers the unsettling character upon the relation, but the fear of having forgotten, of continuing to forget, of forgetting tomorrow to fulfill some task or other. For tomorrow one must not forget to remember. Paul Ricoeur. Memory, History, Forgetting, Paul Ricoeur. Memory, History, Forgetting, like its title, is divided into 3 major sections. Ricoeur first takes a phenomenological approach to memory and mnemonical devices. The underlying question here is how a memory of present can be of something absent, the past. The second section addresses recent work by historians by reopening the question of the nature and truth of historical knowledge. Rico explores whether historians who can write a history of memory can truly break with all dependence on memory, including memories that resist representation. The third and final section is a profound meditation on the necessity of forgetting as a condition for the possibility of remembering, and whether there can be something like happy forgetting in parallel to happy memory. Memory and late modernity.
How are you feeling?
Someone else want to take over?
Who's next?
I can do it, Benda.
Great.
I have no memory. Every day is a new day because I don't remember the day before. Every minute is like the first minute of my life. Andy Warhol. The memory of what is not may be better than the amnesia of what is. Robert Smithson. These portraits trace not only the appearance of the subject, but a way of being with. They are the product of months of sittings, as if appearance is the starting point of a mining of being. It is as if they are a contest with memory or to mark an arrival at a juncture that is just the erasure of it. Frank Albach, head of Catherine Lampert, version 1, 1980.
He died I think it was last month.
Howard Hodgkin painted from memory and often worked on a single painting over 1 or more years. They invariably formed a link to both place and an exact passage of time. As painting, they invite the spectator into a process of absorption with the play of colour and marks drawn into an intensity of relation. This painting is from 1997 to 1999 and is titled Memories. What does the artist do? He draws connections. He ties the invisible threads between things. He dives into history, be it the history of mankind, the geological history of the earth, or the beginning and the end of the manifest cosmos. Anselm Kiefer, Eisensteig, The Iron Path, 1986.
That's a railway line to Auschwitz.
Through the course of these life works, Heiss moved from a year of solitary confinement in a sealed cell to a year in which he punched a worker's time clock in his studio every hour, on the hour, to a year spent living without shelter in Manhattan, to a year in which he was tied by an 8-foot rope to the artist Linda Montano, and finally to a year of total abstention from all art activities and influences. In 1986, Heiss announced that he would spend the next 13 years making art, but not showing it publicly. When this final life work, an immense act of self-affirmation and self-erasure, came to a close at the turn of the millennium, he tersely and enigmatically said that during this time, he had simply kept himself alive. In these performances, repetition dominates the passage of time in ways that destroy duration. Every day becomes like an experience as if machine-like, and the texture of time is thereby erased. This is an emblematic of the switching which occurs as machinic memory supplants human memory systems. Film and memory. Hiroshima Mon Amour in 1959 by Alain Resnais is centered upon a brief relationship between a French woman and a Japanese man. The dialogue between this couple focuses upon memory, forgetting, war, and oblivion. I saw everything.
To which he'd reply, "You saw nothing." So it alternated between her seeing and remembering, and him saying she didn't remember, didn't see.
I'll remember you as the symbol of love's forgetfulness. Why deny the obvious necessity of remembering? We'll probably die without ever seeing each other again. Alain René's last year at Marienbad, 1961. It is unclear as to which time the film is occupying. The characters appear to be trapped within a zone that they exert little by way of either understanding or acting within. In the film The Double Life of Veronique in 1991, who are born at identical time and have formed a common identity despite living in different cities. In the film Vertigo, 1958, Scotty and Madeleine visit California's Muir Woods National Park. She becomes enthralled by the giant redwoods and she walks over to one of the trees that illustrates all the ring markings with the dates in history in which the ring were formed. And then she shows Scotty when she was born and when she died, as if in a trance.
A still image of them looking at a giant redwood tree, which should grow to over 2,000 years old, but generally they're 600 years old. That's from looking at the redwood with the marks and history.
Scotty remained obsessed by the memory of Madeleine, despite believing that she had died. But when he meets a woman called Judy, his obsession for her is triggered all over again. Part of his pursuit was in getting her to change her appearance to look like Madeleine, but eventually he realizes that they are the same person. Chris Marker's film La Jetée in 1962 consists of still images in what appears like a labyrinth of memory in which access to a future is being denied. This is an image from La Jetée that references the passage in Vertigo where Madeleine points out where she was born and when she died. La Jetée itself is based upon the idea of a twice lived instance of seeing the moment of his own death. My working hunch was that any memory, once it's fairly long, is more structured than it seems. That after a certain quantity, photos apparently taken by chance, postcards chosen according to a passing mood, begin to trace an itinerary to map the imaginary country that stretches out before us. By going through it systematically, I was sure to discover that the apparent disorder of my imagery concealed a chart, as in the tales of pirates. And the object of this disc would be to present the guided tour of a memory, while at the same time offering the visitor a chance for haphazard navigation. So, welcome to Memory Land of Contrasts, or rather, as I've chosen to call it, In Memory. And that's Chris Marker. The central memory is given its name because of the fundamental role it plays in the logical organization of Alpha 60. But no one has lived in the past, and no one will live in the future. The present is the form of all life, and there are no means by which this can be avoided. Time is a circle which endlessly revolving. The descending arc is the past, and the rising arc is the future. Alphaville in 1965 is a science fiction film that is set in a zone called Outer Lands, which is controlled by a computer called Alpha 60. Memory has been erased, and with this sentiment in language. It is a model of a society dictated by logical outcomes. The secret agent Lemmy Caution develops a language that resists this technocracy. For Godard, television makes forgetting while cinema made memories. Numero 2, 1975. Tchaikovsky adapted a short science fiction story called Solaris in 1972, in which the name of an intelligent oceanic planet able to materialize the memories of subjects who come into contact with it.
So his wife, where he was on Earth, had committed suicide, but she, because he's still got such a strong memory of it, the planet rematerializes her. And she has to learn about memories again. She's completely blank. She doesn't know who she is, and he can't. In a way, he can't separate himself from her, despite the fact he knows as a scientist that she's not real, that she's a simulation. So he just wants to live his life again with her.
We're so close to that happening these days, though, with this talk of AI being able to recreate a persona that you can ask questions of, and think once you die, you can create this second image of yourself.
Mm. This is the Solaris planet.
Blade Runner in 1982 by Ridley Scott is both a science fiction and a film noir film that centers on a character whose job is to hunt down and eliminate replicants. The simulation has reached a point where the replicants start to believe that they are human by virtue of the memories they have been implanted into their cognitive and affective reflexes. Blade Runner ends by suspecting his own identity after falling in love with the replicant in question. Remembering Pasolini at the graveside of Gramsci.
Chomsky, Italian Marxist who was imprisoned, wrote prison notebooks, very famous in the 60s.
It is a common experience to visit a grave of the deceased as if it forms a link to the memory of the other. This experience is the means of connecting to the dead with the living in order to create continuity. Perhaps in another way, the simulation of a persona from the past provides the means of finding a common route across time into the future.
This Che Guevara when he was hunted down by the Bolivian military and CIA.
The corpse of Che Guevara is displayed for the world to see. An officer of the Bolivian army points to his wound. Another officer holds his head as if to secure eye contact. The man is dead, but the image lives, gains potency, and with this, the memory and the myth of Che expands. Yukio Mishima wrote his first novel, Confessions of a Mask, in 1949. He started to have photographs made into homoerotic poses such as this one of Saint Sebastian. He lived his life by blending fiction and reality, finally committing ritual suicide in public. Then, what is the transcendental nature of memory? I don't understand this well, but, for example, when people fear darkness, or when they stand transfixed by the horizon at the seashore, the only thing I can imagine is that people are sympathizing with every cell of their body, with a distant memory of something. Whether this is an accumulation of memories carried along for an outstanding length of time since antiquity by the biological cells themselves, or a system of memories cultivated over a long period of time by history of humans and the world, or something else entirely, is beyond my interpretation. But whatever it is, I have the feeling that it is accompanied by a certain dread. Daido Moriyama. In short, the apparent reality that the photographer shoots thinking now, is actually the intersection between the world's boundless past that disappears into the distance and the future that comes walking out of the distance, bringing premonition and nostalgia. In other words, memory is not simply the repeated reproduction of the past. With the watershed of the continually forged present as the borderline, memory imagines the past, is reconstructed by passing through the variety of media, and is further projected onto the future that is to come in an eternal cycle. That's what I think at present, as I snap pictures via my own memories. I think the documentary character of photography is not simply the freezing of time of an event, but rather has the quality of being unceasingly involved with the totality of time stretching endlessly before and after. The fact that many people can individually share ownership of a single photograph is because their individual memories are involved in its interpretation. Moriyama again. While each memory has its own context, the light that strikes each of these appears in complex interplay inside me and is regenerated as a new memory of light, which in turn continues to require the presage the further stimulation of the next light and memory. The one place where all of these cycles of light and memory converge is history. Photographs are fossils of light and memory, and photographs are the history of memory. Moriyama. This is Hiroshi Sugimoto, 2014, The History of History. What is truly beautiful is something that has withstood time. Time advancing, with its unforgiving power to rot, intends to return everything to the soil. True beauty is that which has survived time and preserved in color and form. At some point, there will come a time when its color and shape will fade away. This world is the interval where something shifts from being to nothingness. Sometimes in that interval, beauty sparkles like a solved riddle from a secret language. Hiroshi Sugimoto. Photography is a system of saving memories. It's a time machine, in a way to preserve the memory, to preserve time.
Can I come in here? I
Yeah.
saw that in Sydney a couple of months ago when there is a Sugimoto exhibition at the Museum of New South Wales, whatever, that he had camera lens open for 2 hours at outdoor theater. So he wanted to see what happened when he has this. So after 2 hours of cinema, that's a white blank screen. So there was a series of those photos he took it in outdoor cinema, inside of certain cinema, opera house, this sort of thing, whole series. So I thought I'd just add.
Everyone is the other and no one is himself. Heidegger. The two most powerful nations, the US and China, have almost opposite relationship to their tradition. China has a sustained history going back thousands of years, where the US has only a brief history, so is data rich and memory poor. This implies a very different memory body that serves to determine identity and orientation. Both share the same time zones, but not a similar memory map of the world. Data is economic, whereas memory is more of a cultural attribute. But the struggle is to align data with the memory within the culture that is emerging. With the advent of AI in the mid-50s, the development not only of intelligent machines, but also with the growth of there being a recall of all known data. This implies all economic activity is and will be directly impacted in ways that promise to be more dramatic than other technological paradigms of the past. The relationship to the past and the future becomes reconfigured. Fritz Lang, Metropolis, 1927. The imaginary fusion of technology and humans is less of a visible spectacle than futurists dreamed of. It has advanced far beyond this, but at the same time in ways that is seemingly less intrusive. As the extent of technological power has expanded, so has its shadow in the form of trauma and dysfunction. It is as if data collection is also replicating memory, disturbance in the wake of it. Data and trauma, the black hole of forgetting. What happens when there is an attempt to bury a whole people and turn a place into a grave? Can memory be buried, or does it always seep out? Heidegger thought that the history of metaphysics was a history of forgetting, of being. The central question is, has this fault line made extinction an inevitable outcome? What would constitute a saving power? Perhaps we are required to access the memory contained within mountains to get a glimpse of what our sense leads us to do. And even the noticing beasts are aware that we don't feel very securely at home in this interpreted world. Rilke and the Images, Maruyama's Stray Dog, 1971. Do you think there's such a thing as a collective memory, or is it each individual's perspective on the situation or the experience that everyone has had a different lens on?
Isn't culture or custom also part of collective memories? Different ethnic groups, countries. I was thinking about that in the slide mentioning China versus US. And I was in Europe months ago and I was in US a week ago. And I was thinking about that Europe has thousands years behind and US has a couple of